One of the most important functions of the Senate, not exercised every day, but very, very often, is to advise and consent on presidential nominations to the courts. And of course, there's dozens of judges that come before us, but probably only once on the average of about 2.5 to 4 years does Supreme Court justices come to the United States Senate for consideration. So the last week we've had Judge Sotomayor come before our committee, being appointed by President Obama to the Supreme Court to fill the vacancy by the resignation of Justice Souter. Monday, we made opening statements. Tuesday, or yet Monday, she made her opening statement. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we spent time, all 19 of us, asking her questions. We had 30 minutes, first round, 20 minutes the second round, and 10 minutes the third round. I had an opportunity to ask questions each one of those rounds. My first series of questions dealt with the issue of the constitutional protection for private property. In other words, government can't take your property without a public use and without compensation. Now, most people think that's a highway or something like that, and you get paid for your land. But a lot of times, local communities are taking for public use or public purpose for private development. And that's infringing my judgment upon Fifth Amendment guarantee of private property. So I spent a great deal of time asking her questions on the subject of private property. I went on to ask some questions about what I call judicial philosophy, how she observed her job of being an interpreter of a law, which I think is the proper function of a judge, or being a legislator, in other words, making policy, because she had made a lot of statements that a circuit judge, where she's been for 10 years, does in fact make policy. Well, I'm looking for somebody on the Supreme Court that doesn't infringe upon the legislative and executive branch of government beyond the constitutional right of the Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution or interpret those laws. In other words, a justice should not legislate from the bench. Why? Because they're appointed for a lifetime appointment. If they legislate, you can't remove them. Besides, legislation is what we in Congress do, or state legislatures do, because if you make policy, you can remove a congressman or a legislator, but you can't remove a judge. That's why it's important that we find out precisely how they feel about their job as a justice to judge and not to legislate, because there's a lot of concern about her, a lot of speeches, a lot of writing that she did. One area that I questioned her on was going back to her the person she's replacing, Judge Souter. I asked him this very same question, and he more or less implied that sometimes maybe courts have to fill vacuums that that legislators don't do something that some judge thinks we should have done. That's not their function, but that's the way Souter ended up being a justice on the Supreme Court, trying to fill vacuums. I want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And so I asked the questions about filling vacuums. Quite frankly, I did not get a very definitive and satisfying answer on that very point. Well, this went on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And probably in a week or 10 days, we'll be considering your nomination before the committee. So I will have to now, obviously I know how she answered questions I asked, and I was there for most of the other questioning, but I don't know. I mean, you don't really remember what 18 other members of the committee said. So I have a chance to review what we call the transcript, very thick document of what other questions were and what other answers were. And it'll be from this document, every word that was said in this hearing, to draw a conclusion of whether I should vote yes or no. And probably by the next time I report to you, I will have my mind made up and maybe even have cast a vote in the committee at that particular time. This will be the 12th justice that I've had a chance to vote on. All of them have been approved except for about 22 years ago, a person by the name of Judge Bork was rejected, but I did vote for him. If I vote no on Judge Sotomayor, it will be probably the first time that I've cast a vote against somebody going to the Supreme Court. Now, to be perfectly candid with you, 10 years ago when she was appointed to the Circuit Court of Appeals, I did vote against her because I thought she was a person more apt to legislate. Her cases seem to be fairly moderate, middle of the stream, but her speeches and things that indicate activism bothers me at this point, but not conclusively yet. So that's what advise and consent is all about. I hope you'll follow congressional action on approving or disapproving her over the next 3 weeks. Thank you very much.